Hello and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. So firstly, I'm Jumana Akhtar. I'm a member of the Early Careers Committee of the British Society of Soil Science, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our fifth Unearth Your Potential workshop. This is on stakeholder engagement and soil literacy. Can I just say, as you're joining, can you please put your name and institution in the chat so we know who you are? So before I welcome our presenters, I would like to introduce the British Society of Soil Science as hosts of today's session. We are an established international membership organisation and charity committed to the study of soil in its widest aspects. We bring together those working within academia and have a growing membership amongst practitioners implementing soil science in industry and those with a keen interest in soils. Before we begin, just some basic housekeeping. All your microphones are muted for now. However, there will be opportunities to get involved throughout the session. There is also a chat function, which we will be utilising. We will be taking questions towards the end of the session, but we'll be monitoring these throughout the workshop. Today's presentation has also been awarded BASIS and NRO CPD points. If you are registered with either body, please contact us directly after the event. Finally, please be aware that we are recording today's presentation. So on to the workshop, and I would like to introduce our presenters before I pass over to them. So firstly, we have Dr. Emma McKenna. She's the UK lead for LOESS, the Horizon Europe Mission Soil Project, working across 15 countries to strengthen soil literacy and transform soil education at all educational levels. Within LOESS, she focuses on bringing community-identified soil health challenges into university teaching, ensuring the real local concerns, driving meaningful research and student learning. She has over 2 decades of experience in EU-funded collaborations, leading in several major European projects that reimagine the curriculum to connect academic learning with societal needs. She is a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy and in 2024 was awarded a National Teaching Fellowship. We also have Dr. Calum McGeown, he's a Science Shop Officer at Queen's University Belfast, where he works with students, academics and external community partners to develop and facilitate collaborative community-led research projects. Calum is passionate about the role that engaged research and learning can play in tackling societal challenges and has a particular interest and academic background in issues of social, climate, ecological and economic justice. I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Karolina to introduce herself because she might be better.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing my colleagues. So I'm Dr. Karolina Trdlicova, and I am a interdisciplinary social scientist working at the James Hutton Institute, and I focus on topics related to nature, climate and energy, and I'm here because I work on a citizen science soil science project, which I will talk about a bit later. So thank you for the introductions.
And finally, we have Dr. Claire McDonald, and she's a senior lecturer in the School of Chemical and Biopharmaceutical Sciences in Technological University Dublin in Ireland. She has been implementing community-engaged research and learning with chemistry students since 2007, and community partners have included small businesses, an open prison, the Garda Road Safety Unit, schools, after-school projects, community gardens, and the Well for Zoe charity in Malawi. She has monitored many colleagues in CERL and co-developed and facilitated an online CPD course on community engaged learning for university staff in Ireland, which ran twice in 2021, 2022, and had 60 participants. She's an Irish partner on the EU Horizon funded LOESS project. So to start us off, I will hand over to Emma.
Thank you very much, Jumana, for that introduction. And we want to say just we're very grateful to be here. I think speaking for myself and I think for Karolina as well, We have found the British Society of Soil Science to be very engaging and very supportive of the work that we're doing in these EU projects, and we're very grateful for the chance to speak with you here. So just to take you quickly through our session plan, obviously there's the welcome. We will then be establishing learning outcomes for the session. We will be covering off why you might want to work with stakeholders, how you might work with stakeholders. And for this section, I should say that there will be a practical exercise where we'll be asking you to post in the chat. We'll be asking you to look at something, a real life case study, and to post in the chat. So please do make sure that you have access to that. Then we will talk a little bit about principles, resources, and practical advice for research design. And finally, we'll have closing and evaluation. So we hope you enjoy this session with us today. And I'll pass off to my colleague Claire in Technological University Dublin to talk to you a little bit about the learning outcomes.
Great, thanks Emma. So we have these intended learning outcomes that we think align with the workshop, but we'd be really interested in hearing from you about your own learning outcomes in a minute, about what you hope to get from the workshop. But just to go through what we anticipate, that you'll be able to assess and reflect on your current understanding of partnership working and community engaged research and identify personal learning goals, which we're going to come on to in a minute, as I mentioned. You'll also be able to describe key principles of partnership working, and we'd also hope that by the end of the workshop you'll be able to identify opportunities for partnership working for soil health and identify opportunities within LOESS and ECHO, the two projects we're involved in, to deepen your knowledge. So we're just going to go on to the next slide and present the first activity, short activity, which is just a bit of a warm up to get you using the chat. So I'll just explain the principles of the hold and share to you first of all. So we just want to know what you want to get from this workshop. It may align very closely with the learning outcomes we've already identified for this workshop on partnership working and stakeholder engagement in the context of soil health. But we'd just like to give you an opportunity to think about what you want to get and also for you to share that. So the hold and share will involve me setting a timer for 2 minutes, which I'm about to do, and about a minute for you to think about this, and then a minute for you to type into the chat. But please don't press enter and post in the chat until I say the time is up, and that way we kind of get a better sharing of the personal learning goals. So I'm just going to start the timer now. Great, so we have I'm interested in understanding where ECRs and soil sciences are in terms of thinking about stakeholder engagement and partnership working. And maybe you can just type in what ECR means, Emma, because I've got a blank now right now, I'm afraid. And better understanding of stakeholder engagement. Great, yeah, that's very much early career researcher. Great, thanks, Emma. So a better understanding of early career researchers in soil sciences are in terms of thinking about stakeholder engagement and partnership working. So that's great. The focus here is on stakeholder engagement, and that's very much what people have come to learn about. So that's just re-emphasize that. If anybody else wants to type in anything else, I'll just give a couple more seconds in case people just didn't get up to speed with the activity. But that's fine. Okay, so we'll move on then. Emma is going to talk to you now just a little bit about stakeholder engagement.
Thanks very much, Claire. And we will be coming back to another of these interactive exercises in another few minutes. So just to prepare you for that. And we have kind of designed the workshop in a way so that you are stakeholders who are engaging. So it's just to kind of stress that aspect. And I suppose what we're thinking about here is why you might want to work with stakeholders. And there are kind of two aspects to this, one of which is why you might want to for yourself. And then the other aspect is what is going on in the external environment that might encourage you to. So I suppose the starting point is really that research is better if you work with stakeholders. What we find is that most researchers are doing their research because there's something they really care about there. There's something they really want to achieve. And working with stakeholders can help you to achieve that. So, for example, stakeholders can help you to design and frame your research or co-design research with you. Speaking to the citizen science piece, which Karolina is involved with, They can help you to collect data, to coordinate data collection and interpret your findings. You can make sure that your research is relevant to stakeholders. So mostly people are doing research because they want to make some kind of a difference. And to make a difference, you're going to need engagement from other people. If your research is relevant to them, you're more likely to be able to make that impact. So you want to make sure it's relevant right from the outset. You can gain from the knowledge that stakeholders have, and that can help you to identify and address unseen gaps in your own knowledge. And this is the stuff that you don't know until someone tells it to you. So you're able to kind of gain knowledge because many stakeholders also have very deep and rich knowledge themselves. You're able to gain knowledge that you don't already have. And in the end, this creates better quality research. And better quality research that helps you make a difference in the world. So it helps you move your research from theory into practice and enable adoption of solutions as well, because people are bought in from the very beginning. And finally, you know, it's something I find because a lot of my work is actually with students right through from undergrad to PhD level. And there is something that knowing that other people are invested in your research and the outcomes of it that helps you maintain your own morale and maintain motivation, because research is hard work and it is really a long slog. And when you're having those kind of moments when it feels like a lot, it's good to know that someone is interested and someone is engaged with what you're doing. And if you're interested in this kind of why you work with stakeholders piece, I would really encourage you to look at resources from the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement, who are based out of Bristol in the UK. They're the oversight body for public engagement in the UK, and they do some amazing work and have some fantastic resources. But also there is a different aspect of it, which is kind of self-interest, because most people do want to be funded in the end for the research as well. You'll all be aware of Mission Soil, I'm sure, with this goal that 75% of soils will be healthy by 2030. And all European soils will be healthy by 2050, which I would imagine we're all quite invested in. And they'll have spent €1 billion on this by 2028. And I guess one part of this is about trying to make sure that people across Europe know and understand why soil is important. And this is why projects like our project LOESS and like the ECHO Soils project exist. So we are kind of focused around soil literacy and soil education for soil health. And the projects that we're working on are really about trying to increase engagement of the public and engagement of stakeholders with the idea of soil. But you'll see on this slide here that one of the goals of Mission Soil is to try and get people from all walks of life involved in supporting the idea of healthier soils. And this is why they have created what they call living labs, where farmers, researchers, companies, the general public all work together to develop solutions around soil health. Based on the idea that people don't know or appreciate enough why soil is healthy. And this slide is from a project called Soil EU. There are currently 45 living labs across Europe, and to date, I could not find evidence of any in the UK, which does suggest that when calls are coming out, there's a gap there. So if you are able to kind of think about or evidence stakeholder engagement, this will be a bonus for you if you're looking for research funding, which most researchers are. So there are the two sides of why do it. There's the kind of because it's the right thing to do, and also because it works for your career, essentially. So I'm going to hand over to Karolina now. Oh no, I'll talk a little bit about LOESS just first. So just to say, the LOESS project that myself, Calum and Claire are involved in, literacy boosts through an operational educational ecosystem of societal actors on soil health. We will do anything for an acronym, is clearly the takeaway there. But our aim overall is to raise awareness and understanding of the importance of soil and its functions across Europe. And we are working across the education system, schools, vocational education, training centres, universities and the general public. And we have 20 partners across 15 countries. I should also add that we are now into a slight extension period of the project, which is why we're able to offer this workshop. we will still be working on the project until the end of November. So I'll hand off to Karolina now to talk about the ECHO Soils project.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. So I think ECHO, I just looked up the acronym for us, stands for Engaging Citizens in Soil Science, the Road to Healthier Soils. It's also an EU-funded project. It's a citizen science project. If you can just go to the next slide, Emma. And I just want to talk a little bit about how you can embed some of the stakeholder engagement and the values of the project. So the principal sort of core goals of ECHO are both to map the state of soil across Europe, as well as engage as many citizens as we can. And our goal is lofty. Our goal is to engage 16,500 citizens across Europe and collect the same amount of samples. And where this project and this type of engagement fits in with what we're talking about today is that citizen science can be quite extractive and can be conducted in a way where researchers engage with certain communities just to gather data, and the relationship is very one-sided. But some of the ECHO values reflect that relationship can be actually quite symbiotic rather than extractive. So our sort of principles for engaging, as are depicted on the slide, is to engage citizens through increased knowledge, stimulate their interest in soil health. So by giving them the opportunity to collect a soil sample and providing them with information, stimulate their interest in soil and getting them involved in the scientific process so they themselves get something out of it. We're hoping that what they get out of it is that they will feel empowered and to do more soil science themselves, or to be engaged in further research, and or one of the things in the kit that we provide them with is a pH strip to test the pH value of soil. So perhaps our project will empower them to then do it themselves, knowing that it's quite an easy scientific method to endeavour on your own. And thirdly, to enable citizens to take an active role and directly participate in decision making on soil. So that could be, I work with a lot of allotment holders. Through the soil testing that they're involved with, they may discover that their soil is particularly acidic or alkaline, and we're hoping that through that project they'll feel empowered to then research as to how to best treat their soil and what sort of decisions they can make within the soil that they interact with to help the soil and help themselves. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to my colleague. No, it's still me, isn't it, after this slide?
Yes, please, Karolina.
Yes, it is. Yes, sorry. So we've talked about sort of engaging with citizens and how to work with them and how to engage with them. Some of you may have different levels of experience. Some of you may very well be very well versed, that was a lot to say, with engaging with different types of stakeholders. So just out of interest, if you can pop in the chat, how confident are you with engaging with different communities? And that could be, the communities that I engage with in ECHO are reaching from academic communities, student communities, to allotment holders, to I work with some retired teachers, I work with Brownie leader groups. I work with people from Keep Scotland Beautiful. So really a wide range of citizens and a wide range of stakeholders that I have quite a high level of comfort to talk to, because it's part of my job. But if you can share in the chat with us, how confident are you? And there's no right or wrong answer, but just for us to get a gauge of where you are in terms of approaching different communities, perhaps outside of your academic bubble. I'll just give you a minute or two to do that. I have to say, looking at a slide, for example, number 4, we have not very confident enough, tried it, but fell out of my depth, which I certainly felt at the start of this project, because I'm not a soil scientist by background. I'm a social scientist who has engaged with citizens and stakeholders on soil science. I've often had to call upon my soil science colleagues to get that level of expertise, but actually I found that when engaging, that was not really the core of the connection that I was able to establish with the stakeholders. It was more so about them understanding the research process and building mutual trust, rather than them expecting me to know everything on the spot. Right, maybe if someone hasn't yet contributed or is still thinking, please feel free to keep writing, and I'll hand over to my colleague Calum, I believe, for the next slide.
Thanks, Karolina. Yeah, so building on that, really going to think about how to approach this kind of engagement work. And really understanding, first of all, this slide speaks to where community partners, external stakeholders are coming from. And it's really important at this stage to understand and value the different kind of knowledge that exists outside of academia and your own discipline, perhaps. And valuing this and understanding it is really key to working well with stakeholders. So as you can see, examples on this slide of types of knowledge are the scientific or expert knowledge that a lot of you will be engaged in producing and working with on a daily basis. So, for example, the peer-reviewed knowledge produced through scientific research, published in papers, presented at conferences, and so on. But the other forms of knowledge, which are just as valuable and act in different ways, and can give us different insights into particular topics, be that political knowledge, so encompassing those in positions of power, those who are able to influence decision-making processes, local and place-based knowledge. This can be particularly important in working on soil health-based topics, as we've found throughout the LOESS project, certainly, and that's the lived experiences of people in a place and their connection to that place. And that comes through sort of collective, cultural, generational knowledge as well. So people who've lived in a place, particularly for centuries, will have their own understanding around resource management and so on. And it's important to understand that this can complement, supplement, or even in times can contrast with the knowledge that you're bringing. And being aware of this is really important for working sympathetically with stakeholders. And it may influence the kind of questions that you ask of them, how you engage them, and how you work with them. So from this section of the presentation, we're going to work towards the next activity, which is really about developing research questions from a real-world soil problem. So how do you do research within this engaged context? We've listed here really a sort of a map towards doing so, and basically the principles for working towards developing real-world research questions. The first seems obvious, but very much related to the previous slide around understanding types of knowledge, is to listen to stakeholders and understanding what the problems are that they're experiencing, to then map how big the problems are from the community perspective, to scope the problems with them. That can be carrying out preliminary research, be it online or checking sources of information, but also in conversation with them collaboratively, to define research questions, sub-questions, and related tasks, to assess the research questions. So can you or your students, your research partners, undertake them, elements of them, or do you need to consider practical details, such as, for instance, cost, ethical issues, and so on. And importantly, to check the questions with the partner or against their original problem. So did you miss anything? Are there elements more important than others to them? Okay, so we're going to move on to an activity now, really based around developing a research question in this kind of context. And this is taken from a real world question that with a partner that Emma and myself work with in the science shop at Queen's, very much related to soil management in ways. And the problem that they came with was that they are a landscape heritage organisation. We have responsibility for managing walking paths, what we're calling the LOESS mountains. They get in touch to ask for some research. Their walking paths are eroding much faster than they did in the past. Due to the poor condition of the path, visitors are beginning to walk on the grass, impacting soils and biodiversity. They want to make a case for more funding from the government to help them maintain the pathways. So this is our context, this is the scenario. And as a bit of extra background, the LOESS Mountains are a predominantly granite mountain range in the UK. Their highest mountain is 850 meters, so more of a hill. The LOESS Mountains are designated an area of outstanding natural beauty. The area sees over 50,000 visitors every year. Landscape heritage organisations' activities include litter maintenance, maintenance of infrastructure, post-storm tree clearance, invasive species control, and monitoring user numbers and events. So there's the context for our activity, and I'm going to post that slide into the chat now, so you can refer to that. You should see it in the chat. And just to go on to the instructions then. So I want to ask you to do another hold and share activity, as we did at the start with Claire. So I want to ask you to imagine that you're meeting a representative of the organisation. So take a minute to reread the case study. As I say, the slide is in the chat there. And to imagine that you're preparing to meet this organisation. So what questions would you ask them to better understand what it is that they want? And what kind of research do they want? What is the problem that they're trying to solve? What angles can you come at it from? And if you could only ask one question, what would it be? What would be the most important question that really, for you, get to the nub of the issue, or the kind of experience that you could bring into to make it a constructive engagement? So I'm going to take 4 minutes on this. So if you can do that yourself again, to consider that, and then after 4 minutes, I'm going to ask you to post into the chat. So again, do that individual thinking. If you can type up the one question that you would ask in this instance, but hold on to it until I ask you to share. Okay, so hopefully you have something there. If you're ready to share, please start doing so. I see Felicity saying that it's a very live problem for them and the National Trust as well. So thanks, Kevin. Kevin's question: have you carried out a complete scoping exercise of the area in question, which highlights the variety and issues of the hotspots? Yeah, so getting extra to clarity on exact areas, and you're maybe assessing what resources they have in existence. What can you build on, or are there particular issues there in terms of biodiversity, or where in the mountain range it is? Sean, how much is the organisation able to assist in the research endeavour? Yeah, really important. Always, it's part of the expectation management, which is really critical in the work that we do and working with community partners as well, is to make sure that everyone has a foundational understanding of commitments, and so on. That's oftentimes the basis of what you then work on, because that will indicate the limits that you're working with as well. See, Lauren, what are their current ideas or hypotheses as to what's causing the issue? Could help guide the starting point. Absolutely, yes. And I think that comes back to the types of knowledge as well, right? And even if it is maybe anecdotal, or it's not necessarily based in hard science, these could be people who are spending day on day on day in the hills, and have done so for a lot of time, so will have built up their own experience and knowledge and so on, and it's about valuing that. A fantastic question. Felicity, what have you tried that didn't work, and do you know why it didn't work? That's a fantastic one. Yeah, I really like that. Okay, thanks everyone for sharing that. If more occur to you, please drop them in. It'd be great for others to see, even if we're not reading them out. And with that, I'm going to pass back to Karolina.
Thank you, Calum. Yeah, there you go. So this is just a sort of follow-up from the exercise that we did and the types of questions that you may be able to ask, which you'll be probably able to align some of the questions you put in the chat with what we have on this slide. So the obvious one, who is involved, who is this for? Is this for your organization? Does this organization want to provide a service for someone else? Like in this case, we have the tourists, we have the people enjoying the path. Who is all involved in trying to map out really the path, if allow me to use the pun, of everyone that contributes from the research that you're doing here. What is the issue, which might seem quite trivial, but you will almost certainly approach it from a different angle than the stakeholder that's asking. Where, so which geographical area is affected. I would actually change the meaning of the where here as well, in terms of where you can engage with the stakeholders. So for example, a lot of the engagement that I do with my stakeholders, because they are dispersed across the country, is via email, because that's what they prefer, because they prefer an asynchronous type of communication. So scheduling a call with them is actually not somewhere where they want to meet with me because of the types of activities that they're involved with. So that can also be a type of communication and our stakeholder engagement, although the where, I think here refers to geographical area. I would also like you to think outside of the box when it comes to how you engage with these stakeholders. It doesn't have to be always a community hall. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. It doesn't have to be, it can very well be, but it can be different types of communication that you can engage with them with. When, or what time scale? That when, again, as I mentioned, do you want to engage with someone over a long period of time? Does this need to be fixed immediately? Are there some funding deadlines that are looming that they want to target? As a very specific example, I'm working also with the area of natural beauty with the geopark specifically. They would like to maintain their status as a geopark, and they would like to apply for more funding to maintain their status as a geopark. And how we're helping them as an ECHO project through engaging with them and through sampling in that area of the outstanding natural beauty, they can then leverage that and say that beyond the services that they provide, they are also part of a scientific research project, and they've engaged this number of citizens in research, which helps them make the case for why they are an important site. So that sort of answers the why, and that's their why, is we want to leverage engaging citizens in science. My why is I want to get some soil samples. So those whys, it's really important to untangle of why you're engaging with the stakeholders and what they want to get out of the engagement. Next slide, please. So that is still me? Yes. So types of question to ask research partners. So it's most likely that you will not do this research on your own. You are most likely to involve different research providers, different research partners, different research groups. And as Calum mentioned, expectation management is very important. Have you worked with the universities before is one of the questions that we have here. Can you live with the limitations of the research? Again, a very real example from ECHO. I'm asking citizen scientists to collect some data. They get some results instantaneously, like the pH level of their soil. They are able to look at the soil texture and soil color, and I can roughly tell them of what it means if their soil is really dark or if it's really sandy. But then the results from the lab, where we do some heavy metal analysis and some DNA extraction, that takes months, if not years. So I've had to really carefully manage expectations with the stakeholders that I involve, that the results of what they provide to me will take months, and it's really important to communicate that to avoid disappointment. Practicalities, how much involvement they want in the research design and implementation. Some stakeholders want to really be involved in the step-by-step of what is done. Some are happy for you to sort of lead them and take them along. And I think the most important part is at the bottom of the slide, where it talks about listening and not understanding that your stakeholders have their own levels of expertise and their own knowledge, and it's really important to listen to that and to capture that. Thank you, and I will hand over to Claire.
I think there's just a bit there about the ECHO project, Karolina, about
Is there?
citizens as
I am
stakeholders.
so
Sorry.
sorry. I'm looking at the slides in terms of the numbers, and I think they're a little bit off at the. I forget. Never mind. I apologize. Yeah, sorry. So the example here of ECHO is citizens as stakeholders, which I've sort of talked a bit on the previous slide as well. So for us, we're engaging with citizens that range from university professors to students to allotment holders to school teachers in soil sample collection. And as I mentioned, regardless of what their background is, each of those stakeholders brings a different kind of level of knowledge, and it's really important in a citizen science project not to think of the group that you engage with as a monolith. And whilst I refer to them all as a citizen scientist, they all bring very different types of knowledge and very different expectations. And the other points that I have on this slide is actually from an opinion piece that me and my colleague Roy Nielsen published last year in the European Journal of Soil Science on what is important when we communicate on soil with citizens, with the public, and or generally. And it's really important to sort of avoid feelings of doom and encourage and sort of communicate action rather than just state the sort of hard facts, but also state what is being done about them. So if we say, for example, well, soil is degrading and soil is eroding and it has these dire consequences, that can make people feel really disempowered and really sort of desperate for someone to do something. And so it's really important to communicate as well what can be done and what types of research you're engaged with and what kind of research they can get engaged with to tackle these issues that you're communicating on. And also communicating soil health as a process. It's not something that can get just fixed, quote unquote. It's something that can be addressed and readdressed, and communicating it as such. Understanding that just because someone is not involved in sort of maintaining soil health, that's because they don't care. Quite often they do care, but we know from research that there is this value action gap. So sometimes people care about climate, about soil, about whatever it is, but then they don't follow through on that action. And it's really important to understand that. And also I would like to point out that it's really important to build trust with the stakeholders that you're working with, regardless if it's citizens or academics or whomever you engage with, and that trust is not given. And it's really important to come across as a trusted communicator, regardless of the stakeholder that you are engaging with. And now I will hand over to my colleague Claire, and I do apologize to Emma because I know you send me the schedule and I'm trying to follow it as well as I can.
Thanks a million, Karolina. So I'm just going to, my background is, my home discipline is chemistry. So I'm just going to share that perspective. So as I think it's probably becoming very clear already, that communication is key from the first activity that we had, which was all about drilling down into the problem and finding out more, and also those really valuable insights that Karolina shared. There's a huge amount there about communication. But the type of communication is incredibly important, and developing trust, which is also something Karolina mentioned. So I found it's incredibly important to make sure that potential partners know that they have valuable knowledge about the problem that no one else does. And it's incredibly important to take the time to do that and put them at their ease, and take the time to develop that level of trust. That can include thinking about language as well. So that can be discipline based. So there's a lot of abbreviations that get used. There was one earlier I had to ask Emma to remind me about the ECR, but also say a term like neutral in a chemistry and science perspective is usually in terms of pH, but it means something very different to the general public. And then in universities, we talk about vice chancellors and faculties, and we use all of these terms that again can distance us from other people. It's also really important, obviously, to have built-in check-ins at key stages, and it's always, I find a good idea to agree those in advance, that at a certain time we will have a check-in. As Karolina said, it might be by email, but just there are always things that happen that you don't expect. So it's really important to build those in. And also the output is very important, and that needs to be discussed really towards the beginning before the work starts, certainly. And what we've tended to find people are looking for are a poster or report for a lay audience. And if you can manage it to get a face-to-face meeting, or either online or in person, it's great to then be able to talk that through and have lots of opportunity for questions where your partner can share their knowledge. So where you've still got some gaps where they can suggest, they may have a lot more knowledge that they can share about why you found an anomalous result somewhere. So now we're just going to have it. That was my perspective, and now we're just going to share more generally what has been found in terms of these types of problems and working with the communities, drawing a lot from the work of Emma and Calum, that the community will often want to better understand the problem. And within that, we have the 3 next points, which, and a lot of these were brought up in activity 1, which is great that people were thinking about this already. So to know the numbers of people using the paths, how they're being used, assessment of an assessment of the extent of the damage, an assessment of the impact on particular species or the soil, so biodiversity and the soil health as well, and soil characteristics. And then we saw as well that there can be wider aspects, or what we found is there can be wider aspects. So to understand how the community could influence or change visitor behaviour. So that's kind of going into behavioural change, and then building an evidence case to influence policymakers. So that might be in the context of education or the local councils, etc. And also then a very different evidence base, which is really what this particular case study had identified originally, to help secure funding for remediation. So they're all aspects that might come in. And then in terms of disciplines, you probably won't be surprised to see that there's environmental science, geography, physical sciences, biological sciences, all of the areas you would expect to be there. But as we saw, depending on, and I should have said in the previous slide, the community may well be interested in more than one of those issues. So you have to identify where you can contribute best and also ask them to prioritize. But you can see the other aspects coming in there, the social scientists in terms of human behavior change, and also business in terms of the tourism impact and that aspect as well, and making a business case. So what we found in the LOESS project is that it's been really nice to see how a range of disciplines can become involved. And speaking personally, when I've previously been involved in any projects where a number of disciplines could partake, it's just, there's a lot of rich insights you can get from multidisciplinary working, and there's that morale aspect as well that Emma mentioned earlier on. So we're going to move on now into the exercise, the second exercise. So you've had a bit of a warm up, you have the case study that's been shared, so you can have a look at that. And we wanted to just reflect on that and what we've already discussed in terms of it. And we'll suppose that you found an area where you think you could bring your expertise to bear on that research topic that we shared, which is in relation to the pathways in the area of outstanding natural beauty, and to think about the next steps in developing a research proposal and what they would look like. So if you can identify the next 2 concrete steps you would take, and then share one. So again, this is a hold and share activity, and hopefully it's clear to you what's required. You can post any questions that you might like to share or you might like to ask about the activity. And I'm just going to start the clock now. So we'll give you 3 minutes just to think about this, and I'll let you know when you have a minute left, and then if you could share within that last minute, and then we'll or so, and then we'll review. And I'm really interested to see what'll come in, because you've had some really really interesting insights to date and really thought about it a lot. So we'll just get started now on the timing. So I know we weren't able to give you a huge amount of time to think about it, but just if there's something you could. Great, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, that's a really good point. Everything depends on funding and timescales as to size of remediation possible. So I suppose that that is, maybe that's an aspect. We probably have moved on quite quickly in terms of what we're asking you to think about, but you've identified there what would need to be discussed and confirmed before you could take the necessary. Well, I suppose that is part of developing the research proposal, as you said, that you need to identify the particular funding, what's available, and then the timescales in terms of what you can contribute. Yeah, I think you're right, Emma. It is a concrete step. Yeah, so something definite that you can do. So yeah, in terms of the timescales, as you've said, what you can commit to, and also the community partner, and what's feasible to do in that time, and then the size of remediation possible exactly. So that will depend on the funding and the timescales, and this prioritization is going to need to be done there as well. And maybe getting more information about the issue before you can be sure about where to focus the remediation. And then Eleanor has suggested hosting a stakeholder event on the site, which is an excellent idea, encouraging members of the public to talk with the team to gather their thoughts or awareness of the problem and to gauge where the focus needs to be. That's a really sensible, concrete step there, Eleanor. Yeah, and it'll bring perspectives from, I suppose, one of the target audiences, if you want to think of it that way, and develop an interaction and really get things going in terms of that behavioural change, which is very important, and also linked to any remediation works that are going to take place. And it may be, sorry, I actually forgot to mention earlier, we had someone who contributed before who asked the question, whether the paths are going to the right places. And that was a really good question to ask. And maybe that's something that comes in here. If the paths aren't going to the right places, the public may be able to identify, well, I would stay on the path, except, this always arises, and this is where people usually go, or there's this problem with where that path is at that particular stage. So I think that's you can see you've got a few thumbs up there as well, Eleanor. So there's some excellent suggestions there from both Kevin and from Eleanor. Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to add anything? And I would include my colleagues here, but also obviously the participants too. Anything else?
Just seeing one above from Sean, I think came in just before Kevin did.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, I totally missed that. Yeah. To refresh knowledge in the subject area, start to form a literature review, identify what research methods would be best suited to the project in terms of cost, labour. Yet, really sensible steps, and very important in terms of any starting out on any research project. So exactly making sure you have all of the information that you need, and gathering that from relevant sources. And also, as you said, Sean, what research methods would then be best suited. And I suppose that'll also bring in your expertise as well, and what you feel comfortable with being able to apply and to bring your expertise to. And also that ties in very much, I think, with the point Kevin made about cost and labour and the scope, and what can be done in the time and with the funding available, and what needs to be prioritised. So thanks a million, Calum. Sorry about that. So I think, unless if anybody wants to add anything else, that's been really valuable. Sorry that it was so short, but I think we've got a really good sense of next steps there. Thank you. And now I think Karolina is going to talk about, move on to a new topic about the resources that are available.
Yeah, so I think we're now going to give or present sort of two practical resources and two practical slides from both ECHO and LOESS. So thank you, Emma. So this slide for ECHO, I will just briefly explain what's on the map. So we have an interactive map if you're interested in scanning the QR code on your right. If you want to do it later on, just look up ECHO Repo on our website, which is echosoil.eu, and every dot on that map is a citizen scientist that we've engaged to date in that project, and we've collected, last time I checked, over 8,000 samples, which is to say that the stakeholder engagement element of what we've been talking about today, you might approach it from, well, this is really time consuming. This requires resources I maybe wasn't that weren't necessary for me to use before. but it allows you to do research at this type of scale, for example. So then the payoff is also really great. And the way that we are engaging with stakeholders, and this is maybe the practical element of it that you might take and think, oh, that's an idea of how to engage with stakeholders, is for us to be able to manage that sheer volume of samples. What ECHO has done is that each country has recruited what we call soil ambassadors or ECHO ambassadors. Coincidentally, Claire is one of our ambassadors. And an ambassador is someone who has local resources, who is a member of a community, who has some sort of outreach to a wider group of people, and who we send kits to, and then they disseminate the soil sampling kits on our behalf. So, for example, in Scotland, where I'm responsible for coordinating that citizen science engagement, as well as in Ireland and Netherlands, I don't have to myself communicate one-on-one with 2,000 people. That would be impractical, that would be impossible. But what I can do is engage with about 100 stakeholders who all of them have their own community outreach, and maintain those trusted relationships and ask them why they're getting involved, what particular group they are working with, what particular resources I can provide them with, to then be able to work on a project at this scale. So hopefully this is a good example and maybe motivation for you to think about citizen science and think about how worthwhile worthwhile it can be to engage with different groups, because you're then able to gather this large amounts of soil samples that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise without some sort of community or citizen science support. Thank you. I think Emma is next.
Thank you so much, Karolina. And this is also just resources that we have available in the LOESS project. As I say, we have officially kind of ended the project now. We're into a small extension period. So most of our activities have been delivered, and most of our final pieces, outputs, I guess you would call them, have been delivered. So we have a European Atlas of Soil Education and Training. And the way that we've done this is to divide by different target groups. So we have a series of resources for schools, a series for universities, and a series for general public. And this includes things like a crowd mapping tool. So this is an online map where people have identified soil problems that researchers may want to go in and look at, or indeed upload problems onto. We have an augmented reality app, which you could use with particularly children and young people. We have a soil health glossary, which was actually quality assured by one of the colleagues in the ECHO Soils project as well, that Karolina works with. So we've had some nice crossover. We have case studies on innovative approaches as well in terms of education for soil health. We have a MOOC, and again, this is back to the language thing. I know, massive online something course. Anyway, one of those massive online courses on integrating soil education in schools, and that's specifically for teachers. It was developed by the European SchoolNet, who were one of the partners in the project. Who also developed 4 soil health learning scenarios for schools as well. So those are very robust in terms of schools resources. Community engaged research and learning guidelines, a module and a version of this workshop that we're giving today as well, which would have been our resources for schools. So we have a whole range of different resources there. Again, there's a kind of a clickable code. If any of you would like to take that, you can go onto our website. There's more actually than we've spoken about here. And this is just kind of moving into the wrap up bit now. I guess what we're thinking about here is principles for building trust, and that there are some basic principles that are worth thinking about. Acknowledging and respecting and valuing the legitimacy of knowledge held in communities. I think it's sometimes a thing that we in universities can be guilty of, is that we very much valorize academic knowledge, but we don't necessarily understand or respect the knowledge that's held outside of the university, as Calum was talking about, within communities, within the lived experience side. And often they are complementary to what we know. Sometimes they're actually contrary to what we know as well. And I think that thing of trying to be curious about where people are starting from is really important. Involving citizens in problem solving as experts on their own experiences. So someone whose family have farmed a piece of land for, 200 years is going to have expertise. involving them in any remediation ideas that you have can only be a benefit for everyone. Encouraging citizens to become an active part of the innovation process as well alongside this, and collaboratively creating an open and flexible process to support participation and exchange and welcome a range of citizen groups. So basically trying to think about that where, when, what, who piece. Where is the best place to sit down with people and co-design that? Is it online, exactly as Karolina said, because people can access it more easily? Is it a community cafe? Is it an allotment? Is it a farm? Is it a living lab? And create long-term outcomes by changing the relationships, positions and rules between traditional stakeholders and citizens. So really think about where does power lie and how can we share that power a bit more equitably amongst different partners. And in terms of kind of how to be, and again, some of this will be very, very obvious to you, and indeed many of you will be doing this already in different contexts with students, with other scientific stakeholders, so it's probably just an extension of things that you already do. Listening actively, giving feedback respectfully, because sometimes you do need to say, probably we can't deliver this, or we can only deliver one part of it. Being honest about those restrictions, I think, is really important. Being helpful where you can be, if you can give a little bit more, that's always, it's kind of goodwill in the pot. And likewise, your partner might be likely to be helpful to you when you need it. Being able to say no if you know there's something you can't deliver on, and then being able to honour the commitments that you make. So if you're able to say no to some things, hopefully the things that you say yes to, then you can really follow through on or explain if something goes wrong, which is down to the admit mistakes piece, because everyone makes mistakes, and it's often useful if you admit yours, it leaves other people space to admit theirs. And practicing emotional intelligence, I guess, is part of this as well. So in terms of some practical next steps, if you think you might like to try some of this in community engagement piece, I would say in the UK, we are probably quite lucky because we do have, universities do tend to have quite good facilities for reaching out into communities. But you will have your own networks, personal and professional. Someone you speak to at the school gates or at the gym might well be someone who works in a community organisation who might have something relevant that they're interested in you exploring. Obviously, there are the Mission Soil Living Labs and there are citizen science projects as well. Indeed, as Karolina said when we were talking about this session, there are a lot of living labs out there that are not EU living labs at all, that are just facilities that exist already out across the UK. As I was saying, your university is there too, so your colleagues who are in volunteering, who are in work placement, who are in careers, who are in partnership offices, will all have links out into communities. You can look on the web to see what organisations might be interested in partnering on research. And indeed, there's our crowd mapping tool as well. And I'm interested in the fact there are some partners on the call here as well, which is really fantastic. So there are clearly people outside the university system who are really thinking about how do we engage across on these really critical soil issues. In terms of tips, finding a partner with an interest in the process of engaged research as well as the outcomes. So basically who kind of want to make it work and want to co-learn with you. It's always helpful if you say, I am learning in this process, because then people will feed back to you and will be supportive of you. Getting a feel for their approach and activities ahead of meeting them. And sort of being clear if there are things that are non-negotiables from your side. It's better to say that fairly early than to spring it towards the end. And you can say it nicely, of course, but it's better to be clear if you know that there are things you won't be able to deliver. It's better to be clear about that. And obviously, we have more resources here in the Circlet project. We will be circulating the slides, so you'll be able to click through on those. So that takes us to the end of the session. You have contact details there for all of us, for Claire, for ourselves in Queen's University, and for Karolina in the ECHO project as well. I am going to pass back to Jemana to say the kind of formal close, and I would also invite you to, If you can, we would love some feedback. So if you can click on this QR code link. If you would like to give us some feedback on the session, we would be very grateful for that. And recording will be switched off after Jemana's intervention at the end. If you have any more questions, please do feel free to stay on, and we're happy to answer them. But from us, I guess, in the team who were delivering this session, thank you so much to the British Society of Soil Science for the invitation, and to all of you for attending. We're very grateful, and you can keep in touch with us. This is obviously a passion for all of us, and we'd be delighted to hear from you. But with that, I'll hand back to Jemana.
Right, and on behalf of the British Society of Soil Science, I would like to express our thanks to you, Emma, Calum, Karolina, and Claire for presenting today. Thank you all for attending as well. You will find a quick feedback survey in the chat box and also in the follow-up email, which we hope you will take the time to complete. The recording of this webinar will also be available after the event via the follow-up email and on our YouTube channel where you can watch previous workshops as well. We hope to have another Unearth Your Potential workshop later in the year, but in the meantime, please check out our upcoming Zoom into Soil webinar on the topic of long-term experiments, which is taking place on Thursday, the 27th of August. Details will be on the BSSS website and in the follow-up email. I hope to see you at future events, and in the meantime, thank you again and goodbye.